I actually believe that big business doesn't want to be and is designed not to be efficient. Because if you have a look at the way they're structured, one, they are the recipient of massive government subsidies, as you were sort of referring to before. Two, they're often run by people that are formerly in government or connected to government through unions and superannuation funds, etc. And three, they don't want to be too efficient because that way there can't be an argument that they're making government look bad. So what they do is they squeeze the lifeblood out of small businesses and small operators. Yep. And that's why we see this massive consolidation.
I have another idea about that. One of the things that's become clear to me is that Disney is no longer a for-profit company. And why is that? Why does Disney not care that they keep on burning billions and billions of dollars destroying franchises with a political agenda instead of storytelling? And one of the ways that they can get away with that, and the board doesn't sack them, is that the board, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it's correct, the largest shareholder in a lot of cases is Vanguard and BlackRock. Right? And because they run the mutual funds, they get the voting rights. From all the people that basically buy their mutual funds, they're the ones that get the voting rights. And they don't care that Disney is losing money. They're trying to push some other agenda, and it is not about profits for business by actually making a good product. That might be a cancer.
Well, what's the agenda?
Oh, in the case of Disney?
No, in the case of Vanguard.
Oh, well, I think the head of BlackRock is one of the people on the World Economic Forum, is he not? One of the agenda contributors? Do I have that wrong, Larry Fink?
Oh, I'm so limited to what I'm allowed to say here, but can I...
Yeah, me too.
Sorry, you go first and then I'll say something.
I think what I would say is this. There is a nexus going on between government and corporations, right? So big business and big government work in cahoots. So you
there's a name for that. What is it? Yeah.
And basically, it's exactly that. I mean, what they want, what big corporations want, is monopoly or control, right? They don't want entrepreneurial spirit. They don't, the things that have sort of made, that have made Australia and America and free markets economics great. The fact that anyone can go out and start a business. They don't want that. They want to control the industries that they're in, right? And they do that by lobbying government to introduce regulations. The regulations come in, the small businesses can't keep up with the red tape and the regulatory tape and the green tape and the rainbow tape and all the other stuff all these paperwork they got to fill in, right? And you end up with a situation where all the small businesses go out of business and only the big businesses can survive because they're the only ones who can afford a compliance and legal department that's big enough to manage all of that bureaucracy.
That's a very good point.
And that nexus that's an evil nexus between big government and big business is what we, the people, have got to crack. And it's why they hate the populist movement, because the populist movement is the little people pushing back, going, we've had enough of this crap from big business and from big government, and we don't want it anymore. And that's the problem.
Very well said.
Yeah, and I don't think the asset management firms. Yeah, okay, they channel the funds or whatever they're doing. They're playing their own games. But I think that conspiracy theory about asset management firms ruling the world or being that they own things on behalf of their clients, which are other corporations. So it's just a big mush of government bodies and corporations.
What you're saying applies to the banking industry, absolutely. Because once you make the banking compliance much more expensive, only the big players can play. But I think what you said was absolutely beautiful and absolutely correct. But it doesn't explain Disney. Right? Because nothing about what Disney is doing anything other than burning shareholder capital to promote a political agenda, which is in all their films. You can look at channels like...
but it does support their business because it maintains their control. So they see themselves as they want to be the number one dominant media player, right? They own ABC, ESPN, God knows what else they're at, right?
Billions on every front.
Okay, but they still want to be... If I could just explain, there was this theory, well, it's not a theory, but there was a thing that happened that really changed everything in America, and it was that Occupy Wall Street movement, right? So I was working for a major US public relations firm at that time, and the whole thing just shifted. It went from, we're now going to go in there and we're going to tell corporations to be the good guys, right? Because the left are coming after the corporations, and we can't have that after the global financial crisis and blah, blah. So we've got to go in there and so we're going to buy into every bit of woke garbage we can possibly buy into. And that's when it all began, the greening and the LGBTing and rainbowing and everything of every bloody corporation. All trying to make themselves look good to calm the left down, right?
Virtue signaling.
So it's Wall Street saying, settle down. Yeah. And so everybody got in on the act. And the big consulting firms and the PR consultancies, like the one I was working for, but other big the big four, the accounting consulting firms, all those big firms are like, woohoo, fees. We'll go in and charge for a new plan to change your, approach to hiring.
And sensitivity training.
Oh, we got all sorts of training.
Green star rating in property. How efficient is your commercial building? The Aboriginal sensitivity training and welcome.
Mate, my area was crisis communications, right?
Yeah.
We had training. I had a big business in crisis communications training for the firm that I worked for, that I looked after for Asia Pacific, right? We would go into companies after 2001 and 9/11. We'd go in and help them with their crisis risks. They'd be like, oh, that couldn't happen to us. And we're like, well, who thought the 2 planes were going to go in the World Trade Center? So anything could happen. You've got to be ready. And we sold that on that basis. And a lot of companies were doing good crisis prep work and good training. Bang. Global financial crisis. It just disappeared. Where did the money go? Legal and compliance. It all became about complying with these new regulations about woke crap, right? So basically, the money got sucked out of the PR firms and got sent over to the law firms, right? They worked out a way to get some money for themselves. And so they had this. So now compliance law is one of the biggest aspects of law as a profession. It's massive. It's a whole new
industry. Which is precisely the reason why you're never going to see a reduction in these laws. Sorry, did I cut you off?
Yeah, no, not at all, mate. I've been ranting too long.
I just want to wait till I start. Look, I don't want to jump to the defence of Vanguard and BlackRock, both of whom I do business with, and I know some of the tops of these organisations, and you're going to force me to upset our audience and defend the World Economic Forum. So I'll do my best.
Oh, look, mate, I'll defend Vanguard and BlackRock because I've got clients. I've worked for them as well, but I will never defend the World Economic Forum. Well, you're going too far there.
Give me,
I'll burn them all down.
Give me a moment here, all right, and then I'll just show myself out of the studio. No. So, look, with Vanguard, yes, they are an asset management company. I believe, it's been a while since I've looked at it, I believe they will actually allow you to proxy vote, so you don't have to let them vote on your behalf. BlackRock's a little bit different because a lot of the assets that BlackRock is managing, for example, my understanding is that they manage a lot of the government employee pension retirement money for places like California, right? So then there's an insidious relationship between what makes sense politically in California as opposed to what would actually make sense for the people whose money it really is or on whose behalf it's being invested. And I think that without defending the management of BlackRock, I think that puts them in a difficult position because they have to play the political game as well as the investment game. And what we've started to see in the hedge fund and collective investment scheme or managed investment type arrangements is a lot of these companies saying, oh, we better, in order to attract capital, we better make sure that we comply with ESG rules and etc. Now, to the World Economic Forum, I actually got invited to the World Economic Forum and I was quite surprised because I'm not powerful enough or influential enough or big enough a business person.
You're being groomed.
Well, that may well be the case, but I'm basically
our forum.
Some dickhead from Western Australia that happened to get good at trading interest rate derivatives and made really good money. Why am I good at that? I don't know. I was a good broker before. I was a good trader, but interest rate derivatives are the most boring. That's why I'm single, because it's the most boring thing you could ever imagine. But I'm good at it. So I was managing a fair bit of money, and I went to a particular country. I was dealing with their government, and a friend of mine, said to me, hey, you should come to the World Economic Forum. I'm not going to the World Economic Forum. They're like, oh, they'd love you. I'm like, no, they won't, because you know some of the publicly terrible things I said about the World Economic Forum and their leaders? They're like, yeah, that's why they'd love you. I'm like, dude, I'm not going. Also, it'd be a hit to my credibility.
It's an opportunity to buy you. They have to see what your price is.
Maybe,
they have to get you inside their organization.
Are we back?
See if they can either do a honeypot trap or see what your price is. That's your opportunity.
Are we back here in next year saying, oh, World Economic Forum was awesome? But I will say this. Sometimes I think some of these organisations have ended up just on the wrong side of everything. So if you have a look at what the World Economic Forum says that they're about, not what they do, but what they say that they're about. They say that they're trying to make sure that corporations are being more responsible and that they're in more harmony with the needs of people, which is represented by government.
Of course, that's what they would say.
So that's what they say, right? So when you then go to any of these international events, and I've been to a number of international events, not World Economic Forum stuff, but other international events, what happens? You sit down with a whole heap of people, you're at a table, you're talking, and they're like, oh, okay, well, what are you going to do? Oh, we should develop a mine in, the middle of nowhere. Okay, cool. And you know what? We'll employ X amount of women and we'll put a few gay people in there. And you'd be sitting there, you're a polite company, you're having your caviar and champagne, and you just go, yeah, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, cool. Because at the end of the day, when you're sitting at the top and you're looking at, okay, this is going to be a $1 billion investment, and I'm going to funnel 5 million or 10 million or 50 million or whatever into this, and so is everybody else in the room, you don't really care too much about the extra few percent that you might lose in efficiency. What you care about is that you're going to be invited to another one of these international forums with like-minded investors. And so that's what ends up happening, is that they just do these things. So one of the things that the World Economic Forum gets criticised a lot for is that thing that came out that said, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. But that wasn't an official position of the World Economic Forum. That was the position of a group that was presenting something at the World Economic Forum.
No, but the Great Reset was.
Yeah, and
Great Reset was the worst branding and public relations exercise in the history of anything ever.
Yeah.
So as I said,
has a bust of Lenin behind him, and he talks about the Great Reset and how they penetrate the cabinets.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole agenda. It's one of the.
I just want to be very clear though before you go on. I just want to be very clear. I'm not actually jumping to the defence of the World Economic Forum, but what I am saying is that we should actually have, and this is where small businesses like the Chamber of Commerce that I've been involved in, like other groups, this is where we should actually have a similarly equal sized organisation that brings people on, that brings businesses and investors on, that says, hey, we're going to, for example, we're not happy with banking in Australia, we're going to either create a bank or we're going to create some sort of financing regime so that people can access the sort of banking they want. We're not happy with the duopoly, we're going to force competition into the market by bringing like-minded people. So, again, not a defence of the World Economic Forum or other organisations like them,
but something like that.
But it's our failure to do something. It's the Liberal Party's failure to do something which causes this weakness.
100%.
I say the same thing about China. Again, not going to defend China. The Belt and Road Initiative is a fantastic initiative. If I was Chinese, I would be really, really happy. I can't criticise China for that because they're acting in their best interest. Why aren't the Five Eyes nations saying, well, you know what, we'll build one as well and we'll increase our trade?
That's a great point.
Yeah,
I mean, if America was like, we want to invest in Australia, here's $500 million, we want to invest in your tech sector or whatever, none of that. There's none of that.
I can't fault China for basically creating a situation where they're exporting unreliable power to us and importing at cheap cost our reliable energy to them. If I was China, that's what I would encourage. And then, well, how do I actually convince Australia to do something so stupid as to import unreliable power and then give them our reliable power at a cheaper cost? I know, net zero. Green New Deal, inviting politicians who are easily swayed, with a Jedi mind trick or a little bit of cash. How would you do that? Well, one way or the other, we know it's being done to us. The question of how, well, that might be up for debate. But I can't blame China for it. But I can blame our elite politicians and our political parties for buying it.
Well, Damien, I'd like you to weigh in on this as somebody who's been involved in media. So Donald Trump criticised, he's terrible, he's a horrible person, orange man bad, and hates the planet, hates the environment because he was going to pull out of the Paris Agreement. And I used to say to people at the time, I was like, yeah, it sounds awful because the Paris Agreement has such amazing things in it that you really support. Can you name anything? What? Well, have you read the agreement? No. I said, why don't you go on the internet, go on Google, and just see if you can find what the agreement that the US agreed to actually says. Because before you actually criticise Donald Trump for wanting to pull out of it, you should know what it says. I'll tell you what, you'll struggle. If you try looking it up now,
The Paris Agreement.
I don't think you'll find what the Paris Agreement, the US side of that Paris Agreement actually committed the US to do. I don't think you'll find that in the first few searches. You'll have to really, really go through it to try to find what the agreement says. Where was the media to actually say, hey, we're critical of it, we care about the environment, let's see what it actually says? There was no sort of investigative reports. It's not the sort of journalism the Boston Globe did 30 years ago. There's not that kind of journalism anymore. It's
No way.
gone. There's not the sort of investigative reports that you used to see on 60 Minutes, 20 and 30 years ago. You don't see any of that anymore. So, as I said, I think that if people are incensed about government and big corporations, it's one thing to just sit there and whinge about the World Economic Forum and other international organisations, but we should be out there setting up our own and saying, right, we are going to take our country back, and we're going to bring like-minded people to the table.
I got the Paris Agreement obligations.
You have to look it up under suicide pacts. It's in there.
I got it under Grok. Grok's pretty good.
I think suicide pact, isn't that the European Union agreement?
All of them. The Kyoto Accords, the Paris Accords, the European Union Agreement are signing up to net zero.
Here's
Suicide
my
pact.
question for you.
Free with red Kool-Aid.
Kyoto didn't work. That didn't solve the problem. The Paris Agreement doesn't solve the problem. Glasgow doesn't solve the problem. How many times would we need to have a big international climate change agreement before the problem's actually solved?
There's no problem to solve.
Exactly.
The problem is the pact.
Yeah.
It's a big shill just to concentrate more money and power in the government. It's an emergency. It's a climate emergency.
Right.
Nobody is